Hello, today we are in the JustFlight BAe 146 in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and we're going to have a look at ILS or Instrument Landing System, and we're going to see how to control it from inside the aircraft, how to use it, and how what the symbology looks like from inside the flight deck. So with no further ado, let's go inside. We're sat on runway 22 at Stansted Airport just north of London. And let's just acquaint ourselves with where things are in the cockpit then. So we have the Nav1 radio is here. Nav2 radio is on the far side of the just under the glare shield. We have the Nav1 instrument here with the course deviation indicator in the middle of it. It's got a distance measuring equipment at the top left and ground speed at the top right. And on the far side of the cockpit you've got Nav2 with DME and ground speed in exactly the same way. And that's really all we need to worry about at the moment. So we are going to have a look at the map to acquaint ourselves with ILS and what we do with regard to flying around ILS. So this is Stansted Airfield, and you can see on the map we've got a green triangle here. This represents the ILS feathers. So this is the region of the sky you need to try to get into in order to engage the instrument landing system. So this beam, or glide slope as it's sometimes called, begins at about 2,500 feet above ground level and descends down to the runway apron. So you can see it's actually measured the other way around. It's on a 3-degree slope. So you can see here the glide slope is a 3-degree glide slope. So from here on a 3-degree slope it reaches the ground. So that works out at about 2,500 feet at the beginning of what they call the feathers. It's at 223 degrees. Don't take it as read that the ILS beam is at the same direction, or the localiser is the same direction as the runway. Yeah, it may not be. Sometimes you get offset ILSs, and that could be for any number of reasons. This is the frequency that you tune the nav radio into. So we need to tune the nav radio into 110.50, and we need to change our course to 223 degrees. So you will notice there's a yellow arrow in the middle of the nav instrument. That reflects the course that we program in up here. So we need to change that to 223 degrees. Okay, so then it's pointing straight forwards because this is the runway and we are pointing the same direction as the runway, so that makes sense. Yeah, so this arrow always reflects the direction of the runway relative to us. You'll notice in the middle of the nav instrument there's a little aeroplane. Yeah, that's to help you with noticing that. Okay, we're just going to get rid of the tablets and the yoke out of the cockpit so we can see things easily. So yeah, you can see there's that little aeroplane, and there we go. So if we zoom back out a little bit, we need to tune in this nav radio to the correct frequency. So we want 110.50. In the BAe 146 you can actually change the active frequency directly by moving the switch to ACT, which means we're working directly on this. This is different to lots of other aircraft where you can only change the standby frequency and then you have to transfer it by pressing the button. Yeah, so which swaps the numbers. So we want 110.50, which is what's in the standby frequency at the moment. So if we put that on 110.50, this is reflecting the actual ILS beam. Right now it's 0.6 miles away from us. We will go and tune the nav radio 2 in order to illustrate something here to another VOR station nearby, which is this one here, BKY 116.25. So we'll go and tune the nav 2 instrument to 116.25, and you'll notice it's just come alive and it's moved. It's saying it's 9 miles away. And if we change the course, this is a normal nav radio, so if we turn towards the offset line in the middle, we end up knowing what direction it is. So it's at 300 degrees from where we are. Sorry, so we're pointing at 220. If we were to turn to 320 degrees, we would be going straight towards the VOR. And we can check that if we go here and we measure the distance towards the VOR. There you go, 310 degrees, sorry, I slightly misread it. So yeah, 310, sorry, I was reading the markers wrong. And notice there's a second arrow on the line that appears. We'll get to that later, but that's really about radio navigation. We're going to focus on ILS today. Notice we have the same deal here. There's a second arrow. Because both arrows are on the same side, it means we are flying to the beacon, not away from it. Okay. If we were flying away from it, that arrow would flip to the other side. Right. So if we get in the air and fly around, bearing in mind that we need to be at 2,500 feet when we come into the ILS feathers, we need to find out how high above the sea the airfield is. So we've got Stansted showing over here. So the elevation of the airfield is 340 feet. So we probably need about 2,800 feet when we get to the top of the feathers. Okay, so let's go and tune in our altitude. We're going to go to autopilot so we can talk on the way around. We'll go for 2,800 feet and we'll arm that so it stops the climb out at that altitude. We will go to heading mode on the autopilot, so we'll program heading mode. Now there's a small marker on the nav1 instrument which reflects the heading mode, so we can spin that round and make it go the same direction we're going. Also, we need to understand what the split function does. When the split knob is in the middle, it means the nav1 radio is reflected by this nav instrument. It means the nav2 radio is reflected by this instrument. If we switch it over to nav1, they are both showing the nav1 radio. So both instruments are showing this setting. If we switch to nav2, they are both showing the nav2 radio. So this one here is, nav2 radio's there, is reflected on both instruments. So if we go back to split, we get nav2 on the nav2 radio and nav1 on the nav1 radio. Okay, I think that just about covers everything to do with setting things up. So we're going to fly a simple circuit around Stansted and then come into the ILS and see what the symbology looks like on the nav instrument, what the course deviation indicator and the glide slope indicator, see what they mean. Okay, so we come off the parking brake, we go to take off flaps and we accelerate down the runway. So I'll just center the view up a little bit. Steer a little bit sideways, there's a bit of a crosswind today.
Speed alive, both sides. 80 knots cross-checked. V1. Rotate. V2.
Up. Gear up. And we'll hit vertical speed. And turn the autopilot with the button on the joystick. This is an indicator, it's not a button on the master control panel. Okay, so we're in heading mode, we're in vertical speed mode, so we're climbing out. We're going to reduce the flaps down. And we're going to reduce the throttle. So we're climbing up to 1,000 feet now. Now let's go and shut the radio up while we're doing it. So we're going to flick over to a different radio frequency, com radio, so we don't hear the tower anymore. Okay, so remember we're climbing to 2,800 feet, we're armed at that, so it won't climb beyond that. And we're going to start spinning the heading around. Now it's really useful that we have this indicator here. The course will turn with the compass. So when we turn, we start turning the heading bug around to the opposite side of the compass to fly the reciprocal of the runway direction. The klaxon is just that we are within 900 feet of our target altitude. So we're going to move the heading bug around with the roller until it's going the opposite direction than the course we were going. Or than the runway direction, I should say. We're just keeping an eye on the altitude here. One of the big problems with the BAe 146 is keeping on top of speeds. It's a terrible aircraft for running away with you basically because it's got 4 engines and they're incredibly powerful. we're coming round to the reciprocal of the runway direction. If we go and look on little nav map, you can see that happening. You can also see the wind during climb out pushed us sideways, even though we maintained the runway direction. So it might not hurt us to go a few degrees to the right, just to hold against the wind. Okay, so we are now accelerating because we got to 2,800 feet. So I'm just going to pull the throttles back and see if we can arrest our acceleration so we don't get too fast on the downwind leg. Okay, so when we turn back around, I'm going to make sure we fly quite a long way out past the ILS so we get time to talk about things on the way in. So you can see I've turned a few degrees away. We'll turn a few degrees back. So just waiting for the aircraft to complete this leg. And then we can start thinking in terms of what this really means. So you will notice now we have gone past where the ILS beacon would be, and it's kind of somewhere here on the runway. So now we've gone past it. You can see it's telling us it's 2.2 miles away. Yeah? And the small white arrow has lit up on the same side as the yellow arrow, meaning, you know, the VOR is, we are travelling from the VOR. Yeah? It's easier to replicate on the other VOR station that we tuned into to understand what's going on here. So as we turn the course on the VOR, you will see the needle come into the middle, or the course deviation indicator will line up to tell us the direction. So at the moment, the white arrow is on the same end as the yellow arrow, meaning that's the direction to the beacon. If we spin it round, so it would go all the way round, and the white arrow has gone to the opposite side, meaning that's the direction away from the beacon. Yeah, so it's a measurement now from. So if you wanted to fly directly from the beacon, from where we are, you would be flying at about 110 degrees. We can actually check that. So from where we were, if we measure that distance from the VOR station, the 110 degree line would be there, which is where we were at the time. Does that make sense? So when we did it, we were there. Okay, so we're just flying out, getting far enough out that then we can turn back and come into the runway. And then we can see what all this instrumentation really means. So we're just creeping up in terms of speed. We're going to slow down a little bit. We're 8 miles away now from the runway. And distance measuring equipment doing 223 knots over the ground. Just creeping pulling the engines back gently. We'll wait till we're about 12 miles out and then we'll turn back in, because that will give us ample time to describe some things along the way. One of the big problems you get with a jet plane over a propeller or general aviation plane is you are travelling much faster, so your decision times are reduced. So it pays to give yourself time to sort yourself out, basically, when you're doing things. It's a major factor in problems in the air, is people not giving themselves enough time. So you'll notice when we hit the target altitude, the autopilot switched automatically to altitude hold mode. Okay, so we're going to turn back around in a moment to the runway direction. So I'll do it now. So I'm going to turn the heading bug. And because we were going faster throughout the turn than when we did turned off the runway on climb, we should find that we have overshot slightly the runway centre line. Okay, so now I've moved the heading bug to be the exact same direction as the runway. So we're turning back round. It's very helpful today, we can actually see what's going on. A better illustration of ILS, but more difficult to understand, is when you can't see anything. So all you have to go on is the instruments. So there you can see, look, we're about to cross the runway centre line and we've not finished our turn, which is really helpful for us for this demonstration. So we're going to slow down even further. So we've ended up flying back towards the runway, but we're off. What this means is we are off to the right side of the centre line. Yeah, and you can see that on this map. If we draw a line down the middle here, so we can just use a distance measurement to do it, we are off to the right side of the centre line of the glide slope and the localiser. Your lateral position is the localiser, vertical is the glide slope. So this is the localiser indication. So what we can do is just turn the heading back across it. So if we turn to 210 degrees, we will intercept that line. So you can see the airfield out there, we're off to the right. So we'll go at a slightly stronger angle to re-intercept that line. So we're going to go for 190 degrees. You will notice now this line is coming in. This is the glide slope. This is that 3-degree slope. So at this distance from the runway, we're about to hit the glide slope and we need to start descending to stay on it. So I'm going to come off the autopilot and we're going to start following that glide slope. So we'll dip the nose and we're trying to keep this in the middle of this gauge. If it's in the middle, we are on it. If it's above the middle, it's above us. If it's below the middle, it's below us. So we kind of chase it. You can see now this is coming in for the centre line. So without looking outside, we will turn and we're flying higher and higher. So I'm going to cut the throttle. I'm not going to probably do the approach this time because we're just demonstrating things, and we'll turn around and do a proper approach in a moment. So if we go and look outside now, we should say we're directly in line, look, because we've got this line in the middle and we've got this marker in the middle. Just by gently moving the controls around to make that happen. We could do a touch and go. So we'll continue this down manually. We'll do a touch and go. So I'm going to cut the throttles to idle. We need to slow down quite majorly. We're a little bit high, so we're looking at this instrument at where these markers are. We're a little bit high, and we're just to the left, which correlates with what we can see out of the window. Okay, so we're going to use the air brakes now to scrub off some speed. And we'll extend the flaps further.
1,000.
Okay, put the gear down. Now we've got the flaps down, we don't need the air brakes anymore. So we're going to start increasing the throttle. And we're just watching those markers to gently follow the ILS beam down to, and it will take us to the edge of the runway. So even if we couldn't see outside, we can follow these markers. We're low, and you can see that outside that we're low. So we just raise the nose gently. We never completely chase them. We don't keep a control input going. You just steer, to effectively to... I'm doing this on purpose, weaving around so you can see them move. Otherwise, you would just see them in the centre the whole time. So you can see I'm below. So if I raise the nose, we're climbing back towards it. Go over it, we dip the nose, and we come back down towards it. So you have to imagine this invisible line down to the runway apron.
Glide slope. 50, 40, 30, 20.
And there's an aircraft in front of us, so we're going to climb out. And he's landed the wrong way. Anyway, not a concern about us. So gear up. Go for vertical speed. We go for heading mode, but we need to recenter it on the direction we're actually going. Heading mode, and we can turn the autopilot back on again. Okay, we raise the flaps. increase airspeed. Flaps are coming up completely. We can start turning around, and this time we'll use the autopilot to fly the ILS for us. Okay, so we're going to go and arm that altitude again, so we won't climb beyond 2,800. We'll spin this around to fly the reciprocal of the runway direction on the heading. So we'll do a fully automated approach this time. Show you. So that was a manual one, and we were just following the indications. We're just going to spin that heading back round to go the opposite direction than the runway course on the CDI, or course deviation indicator. So we're going to fly out to 2,800 feet again. Again, we can look out the window and we can see the airfield, hopefully, below us. Yeah, it's just over there. So we're just climbing around the corner. Do this circuit again. So on the way back in this time, we are going to use VOR lock and Glideslope lock, just to illustrate how things work. So the aircraft should start levelling out sometime soon. And again, we always have to keep an eye on the airspeed. I'm not using the thrust modulation system, which is, I've got a whole video on the thrust modulation system. The BAe 146 doesn't have an auto throttle, but it does have a system to assist you in setting the throttles. But I'm not using it today. So we're just manually controlling the throttles. But it's a whole other subject, the TMS, or thrust modulation system. Okay, so we are accelerating because we have leveled out.
Descend, descend, descend.
That enunciation is the TCAS system, the traffic collision and avoidance system. So we're going to ignore it. It's just because we've got AI aircraft around us. If you have a look around, we might see the traffic that it's telling us about. Or not. Can't see any nav lights nearby. Can't see anything above us either. Normally it's within about 2.5 miles it would start warning you. Okay, so let's have a look at the map. We're flying back out. We'll fly out to a similar distance and then we'll engage the VOR lock. Now, something you have to be aware of is the VOR lock will not work unless you are already on an intercept course with your bearing or your course for the VOR. So your heading has to be an intercept course for it to do it. It won't change your direction towards the VOR automatically. What it will do is, if you're flying along, so if we look on the map, say we were over here and we were flying towards the line, VOR lock will detect it and straighten up onto it. If we're flying runway heading over here, it won't turn right and then left. Yeah? It's just something to be aware of. By the same token, the glide slope lock won't descend you into the glide slope. You have to come in from underneath the glide slope. So if you think about it, the further out you are underneath the glide slope until you get to about that 2,500 foot mark. So if we come in at 2,800, we'll hit the glide slope at about here. So as long as we come in from underneath it with glide slope lock on, it will then detect it and come down onto it. So again, it's intercepting it. It won't go out of its way to fly into the glide slope for you. You have to be on your way there. Okay, so we've switched to altitude hold mode and we've accelerated enormously. We've broken laws here. We've gone 50 knots faster than the speed limit below 10,000 feet, so cutting the engines. We'll throw out the air brakes. This thing's got colossal air brakes, and the ground spoilers are amazing. It's basically the top half of the wing folds up. So there we go, we got back to 250 knots, and we'll just let the aircraft drift around this corner. when we get a little bit further out. And we'll turn further back in, or turn back in, and then we will engage, first of all, VOR lock, which will steer us, and then glide slope lock, which will bring us down to the runway. So let's do the turn. Keep an eye on the speed as we do it, because we will need to increase speed in a moment. So we're going to spin the aircraft back round again. Whoops. To the reciprocal, so back the opposite or the same direction as the runway. So we're 14 miles out, nearly 15 miles out, which is good. Gives us time to talk about and see what's happening. So when we straighten up, to begin with, I will put the VOR lock on, and it won't do anything. Well, I anticipate it won't do anything. If it does, I will be surprised. We probably need to put ourselves out to one side slightly. So I'll take us out actually for a few seconds to make sure that we're not back straight on the same line. So we're straightening up for a few seconds just to give ourselves an offset to one side. Okay, then we'll we straighten up again to the runway direction. So we're making sure that we're not directly in line. We're going to overshoot on purpose. Start increasing the throttles because we're going faster, remember. We are going to drop the flaps, which will stop us getting too fast. We'll put the gear down. So, we're flying towards the runway, but we're off to the right. Okay? So we're going to go VOR lock. Oh, and it is going to intercept. I didn't anticipate it would. Maybe we already were on a slight intercept. So it's doing that for us. If we had been too far to the right, it wouldn't have done it. So we were fortunate. Okay, so the next thing to do, we're coming in towards the VOR, or towards the ILS. We're 12 miles out. This needle will start to drop, as we saw before, as we're underneath that beam, the 3-degree beam. So if you think looking outside at that runway, the 3-degree beam extends up past us, and it's above us at the moment by the time we're underneath it. So eventually we will intercept it from underneath. By flying straight and level, we'll fly into it. So this is what's going to happen when this needle gets to the middle. We'll have flown into the underneath of the beam. So if we
2500.
we need to accelerate, or we're going to go too slowly. We need to hold about 140 knots.
Descend.
That's TCAS, don't take any notice of it.
Descend.
Okay, so as long as we engage glide slope lock before this gets to the middle, we should be good.
Descend.
So I'll do it.
Descend.
Remember, we're holding 2,800 feet. We're going a little bit slow still.
Descend.
Take no notice of the descend, that's just TCAS. You can see it warning us here.
Descend.
There's somebody alongside us on approach. There we go, we're descending.
Descend.
Likewise captured. Glide slope captured.
There we go.
Conflict.
So let's have a look, and we should find there's an aeroplane right next to us, which is why we're getting the warnings. There he is. It's probably just somebody messing around in the simulator, because he seems to be on a very strange flight path, or he's seen me online and saying let's go and mess with him. So we are on autopilot. All we have to do is manage our speed and the flap settings. So let's go for the next stage of flaps, and we'll see how that affects our indicated airspeed. So let's go next speed of flaps again. Oh, sorry, next stage of flaps. So we're full flaps now, and it's holding the same airspeed, so we're pretty good. We just need to keep an eye on this. So as I said before, the aircraft will not auto land. Well, I'm not sure I said it on this video actually. I've said it on previous videos. the BAe 146 does not have auto land. So you need to get to a decision height where the pilot basically takes over from the autopilot. So I'm getting ready, I'm straightening the screen up. You've got a radar altitude here, we're 1600 feet above the ground. The autopilot is flying at the moment. I will disengage it in a few moments. So it's in VOR lock mode, that gives you your lateral position, then glide slope lock, which gives you the vertical position. So it's basically managing the vertical speed to keep this in the middle, or to try to. Notice it's quite slow at doing it. It doesn't always get it right. So we're going to slow down. It's quite good a tip. You have to remember these aircraft, some of them are quite old. So we're going to disengage autopilot now, and we'll fly it in the rest of the way.
1,000.
So we can, if we had low visibility conditions, we would use this obviously we'd just look at the instruments to follow our path down. So we're just going to correct that slight deviation on the vertical position and dip a little bit towards the runway. No idea what the guy in front is doing. Certainly not going to standstill. Unless he's doing a military style approach. He's going to fly the pattern.
$50, $40, $30, $20, $10.
Whoa. I had a twitch from the joystick then. Did you see that? It was awesome.
Pressure C.
It kind of gave a wickedly bad input. So let's see what that lift spoiler looks like. Can we see it from outside? Oh, it's already gone down. If I chuck the brakes out, you should see it. There we go. That's a major drag, isn't it? You can actually see, if you look carefully, right the way through the wing. And we've stopped very, very quickly, and this doesn't even have reverse thrust. Okay. So we're going to taxi off the runway. So that was really a simple demonstration of the instrument landing system on the BAe 146. And basically, the ILS just uses a course deviation indicator and a glide slope. You have to have the course tuned to the runway direction for this to make sense, and the nav radio tuned to the ILS frequency. And you have to remember it does not have auto land. And something else to bear in mind that we showed, and we were lucky, we were already on an intercept course, which I didn't really want to be, but it won't perform wonders doing the approach. You have to get it in the neighbourhood before it will capture the V-lock and the glide slope lock, or VOR lock and glide slope lock. Okay, so that's it. That's the end of our demonstration of ILS on the BAe 146. Hope you enjoyed that. If you like the channel, please click the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell in the top corner if you want to know when I put more videos out. So yeah, my daughters reliably inform me of how YouTube works, and they continually pour scorn on me for not knowing everything I perhaps should. So yes. Anyway, that will do for today. Say goodbye from a nice sunset at Stansted Airport, and I'll see you again soon.